Next Curve.
Hey everyone, welcome to Next Curve's reThink webcast and our Analyst Corner. I'm Leonard Lee, Executive Analyst at Next Curve, and welcome to this episode of The State of Privacy and Trust, where we cover the hot topics in privacy, trust, and security that matter today. And I have my good friend, Debbie Reynolds of Debbie Reynolds Consulting joining me. And we're going to be talking about personalization. And, just to, full disclosure, our recap of 2023 was supposed to be our last episode, but we were just chatting and just felt like we had to get this off our chest. And personalization, this is a topic near and dear to my heart, believe it or not, Debbie. And how are you doing, by the way, before we get started?
Oh, I'm well. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, so it's great.
Yeah. And so let's get started. This is your idea that we press the record button and get the stuff off our chest. So where do you want to start?
Yeah. Well, let me start by telling you what personalization is and what it means, especially as it relates to privacy. So, as companies, let's say, for instance, companies are moving away from cookies, so that they're depreciating cookies. They're trying to find ways to go towards more of this regulation around privacy, where people can opt out of things and not be personally identifiable. But as those things are kind of going by the wayside, what companies are doing to be able to gather more personal information about you is to do personalization. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this is all the rage in fashion and stuff like that. So they're like, hey, what's your favorite lipstick, or what size blah, blah, blah do you use? And here's our AI assistant. And they're going to help you get this or that. So the personalization is a double-edged sword. So some of it is, let's say, it's very helpful. We say, hey, I want you to know what size I wear because I want you to give me tips on certain clothes or whatever. But when you're doing this personalization, you're giving more information than maybe a company has ever had about you. And the question always is, whenever I hear personalization, I think privacy. So it's like, okay, how is this data going to be used down the line? How private is this information? And so you have to explain about, Apple and this journaling thing, because Apple's not the only one doing this. Oh, no. And so it is, I guess, the good part of personalization is that some people will find personalization very valuable, especially if they're doing digital experiences, like virtual try-on or different things. Like fashion is like all over that, right? The flip side of that is like, okay, now that I've given you more data about me, how is that data being used down the line? What are your thoughts?
Wow. I've been working with personalization ever since the interwebs started. I mean, that might sound like a joke, but I actually, when I was at PwC, I ran a practice, ATG and Broad Vision. So folks who know, the lineage of personalization platforms, Broad Vision was one of the first to really bring a framework, a proprietary but common framework for introducing personalization on websites. And you're making a great point here. One of the things about personalization, it requires a profile, and then a profile then is composed of a number of attributes, and that range of attributes has been growing and growing. I mean, it's literally, now you hear these terms, digital twins. It's literally at a twin level, and that's always been one of those mechanisms to provide folks with a personalized experience, like you were saying. But the flip side of it is what enterprises can do with it, companies can do with it, and what they can do with the information or that profile information to further monetize that data. And that was the challenge that we've seen with these third parties getting access to all this personalization data, right? And so it's beyond just personal identifiable information. It's literally a whole halo of data that defines you. And back in the day, there were two options. You can either set things as to drive personalization, which is usually quote unquote server side, or you can have the experience configured for you, but those configurations would be, let's say, local, and it would be driven by on the client side. Now it's weird. We're with this Apple Journal application, which is a really curious development actually for Apple. It's part of this like broader talk track about the AI PC, right? And bringing generative AI to endpoint devices or large language models on device to drive personalization, right? And the whole idea is that you'll have something like a generative AI or a large language model or a generative AI model that is able to learn about you. So think of it as a personal LLM. And I think Apple has gotten a lot of heat in the press. Not that they really care or anything like that, that they're behind on generative AI, yet they introduce Journal in iOS 17.2 in a very nonchalant way. And it's very reminiscent of these personalized generative AI type applications that you would expect to see. And so, that's basically what we're looking at. And it's a curious application, to say the least.
Yeah. Right. So the journal, it will be about you. So all the data will be about you. So it's not like it's going to the internet and it's looking at different things. So and especially on your device, your device is very personal to you, right? Mm-hmm. So it includes the holy grail of personally identifiable information, in my view, which is location. Right. All that and location. So it's like, hey, your favorite flower is this. You like this type of peanut butter. You walk to the grocery store 2 times a week and you buy bread and you do this and you do that. Right. So I think, definitely not a knock on Apple, because I think, the studies I have a person who's been on my podcast. She was a former general counsel of Louis Vuitton, and she was talking about how consumers like personalization, right? So, and that's fine. So it's like, okay, if you like personalization, perfectly fine or whatever. But I think the thing that's happening is new, is that now these companies are able to collect data that they never had before. And so the question always is, okay, so what do you do? Is this data only for me? Is it being used in some other way that I'm not sure about? Am I sharing it without knowing it to other people? Is it being used in a way to that can harm me in the future? Will it change my job prospects? Not get a house or a loan because of some information that was here? Maybe it's connected to an app. Just like for example, when you, let's say in your device, you say, sign in with Google, sign in with, Facebook or whatever. Basically, from a user perspective, all you're doing is saying, okay, I don't want to have to create a new password, so I want to share this password. But if you read the fine print, they're basically saying, hey, we can read all your stuff. We share all types of information with each other. It becomes like a different data sharing relationship. And I think sometimes consumers aren't fully aware, and maybe if they were, they may change their behavior or decide they want to share different things with different companies.
Yeah, and I think the enemy of concern is convenience. Personalization oftentimes it translates into some form of convenience and affinity, right? But then, like personalization, let's say a personalized, let's say, a personalized shopping list, or maybe not like, suggestions that you get, recommendations. Those might be seen as conveniences, right? I don't have to look for it because I was typing about, let's say, blue dinner plates over in this other site, and somehow I go to this commerce website and it knows about it, right? And so some people think of that as convenient, but that's an example of personalization, right? But there's a lot
Exactly.
of folks who look at it and go, "Wow, that is super creepy." If
Absolutely.
you think about how that
Absolutely.
happened, it's not magic.
It's not magic, and it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. People say, "Oh, this thing I was thinking about, it's just turned up in my feed or whatever."
Yeah.
But where personalization becomes a problem is when it's in those kind of high stakes areas, like sexual orientation, income, stuff like that. And so,
Yeah.
the question always is, okay, so can I really trust this company with this data, or how is it being shared? People just want to know. They're like, okay, I think, that's what I'm striving for when I'm talking with companies. I'm striving for that level of transparency.
Mm-hmm.
But people can make an educated choice, an educated decision. Maybe it's worth it for you to get biometrics for a $10 coupon for Amazon. I don't know, so you have to judge for yourself.
Yeah.
But I think you should know what that trade-off is, and so that relationship, no matter what, is asymmetrical, right? So the company will benefit more from your information than you will benefit from their service. But I think that the asymmetry becomes like astronomical at some point.
Yeah.
Where it's just really no,
yeah,
the data exchange is just astronomically, not in your favor.
Yeah. And, speaking of the journal app, Apple's pretty well known for claiming to be a privacy first company. But, I thought it was interesting that the configuration prompt that you get, because when you open up the application, it asks you permission, but it defaults to opt it in. Right. And we've talked about how a good privacy first principle is to make sure everything is, everything is opt in. You don't configure everything as, hey, we're sharing stuff and I'm going to opt out. I have to opt out. Right. They had kind of like an opt out type of, setting. I thought that was kind of iffy, to say the least. But this is really interesting. It's an application that goes and looks at a wide range of. It can be configured to look at a wide range of information about you. Some of it very personal, like health and fitness information, your photos, your location, right? Your calls and your messages. And a lot more. And so, I think the way that this works, and hopefully the folks at Apple reach out to me, because I did actually reach out to Apple to find out more about how this application works. But it's more than likely they're using, they call it ML model, but it's probably some kind of transformer model, aka a generative AI application that leverages, several indices that are already existing on your phone, like for instance a Photos app, right? So and it's doing something interesting in terms of returning recommendations. So it'll identify an event and then it'll send you a contextual recommendation to write something about a recommended collection of content. Right. It's really, really interesting. But this is like probably one of the first, of a breed of generative AI on device generative AI applications that we'll probably start to see more of.
Oh, I think so. It reminds me a little bit of Moments on the phone, where it tries to pop up which is, I like Apple, but that's a feature I absolutely hate. Because, like, depending on what those moments are, you know what I'm saying? That could be bad, right? That could just be so bad. Like, oh, that's terrible. I never
I
want to see the
remember
picture again, right? So I have to suppress moments. But yeah, I understand. I understand it's coming from a good place. Not everybody has stuff that they want to even think about still on their phone. Oh my goodness, let's delete that. I forgot that was on there.
Yeah. So we talked about generative AI quite a bit this year, and I think this is just probably one of the first indications of what personalization is going to look like on device. And the prospect of what it's going to look like on the server side or up in the cloud, that's another mystery. I mean, I think early on in the year where you saw Microsoft try to make Bing Chat a thing, that was probably like a first initial foray into piloting something that they might try to figure out how to monetize. But
absolutely,
yeah.
Well, that's why they put it. That's why, because I could never understand why they tried to marry it with search. Because to me, it does not need that. Because I think it can work without that. But I mean, to me, that's part of that monetization scheme. So this has been successful. But yeah, I think I can search the internet myself. I don't need ChatGPT or Bing to do that for me.
Yeah, well, you could be using it, you just don't know it. I think they probably front ended it somehow, or at least a certain level of it. But anyways, I think this is a really interesting thing to keep an eye out for in 2024. I mean, like I said, it's a huge part of the AI PC talk track. Are you seeing it anywhere else, Debbie?
Basically generative AI is being infused in any tool that you possibly use already, right? So it's not like you have to go out and try to seek anything out. Like I pop up my LinkedIn and they're like, hey, write this with AI, do this with AI. So I think we're going to see more of that, where it's going to be just more just embedded into things that we use. You may have to turn it off or ignore it if you don't want to be able to use it, but it's going to be there. So I think companies that are trying to like close the gate and say, hey, we're not going to use it, like it's too late. It's in the cafe already, right? So I think we need to figure out how to live with it, or at least give people control where they decide, I don't want that feature. Turn it off.
And I think probably from a regulatory standpoint, I think they'll need to be a requirement for service providers to disclose how they're using LLMs to drive personalization, right? Because there's all kinds of different ways that LLMs and other generative AI tools can be used to enhance existing personalization, like recommender engines or decision engines. There's a lot of ways that they can be used to enhance the contextualization of the outputs and the models themselves. So there should probably be some disclosure, and I think this is the thing is where the regulators are just going to have a really hard time figuring out, okay, what am I really dealing with here?
Right.
Because those developers are going to be 2, 3, 4 steps ahead, and they're going to be developing things with no guardrails.
That's true.
Intended.
That's true. Absolutely. I think from a regulatory perspective, technology always outpaces law and regulation, but we're going to see like a hyper leap forward where technology will be way, way ahead of regulation. But to bring it back down to, in terms of regulation, the best ones are the ones that focus on trying to prevent or address the human harm element, right?
Yeah.
Because if you do that, then you don't have to lurch from one technology to the next, really.
Yeah. And I think, recommendation for the regulators out there, work your way backwards from personalization.
That's right.
And then you will figure out what's going on technically. But then, the challenge is finding the people technically who can then do the forensics and figure out, okay, what's causing all this like damage that no one
That's right.
talks about, or they only realize once it shows up in the dark web.
Right. Absolutely. That's true. That's true. Start with that human centricity and personalization. Yeah, that's definitely the place to start. I agree.
I wish I was talking about science fiction, but I'm not, unfortunately.
I know. I don't know. What is it about the future? It's like people go straight dystopian. I don't understand. So.
The future is here. It's just people don't know about it sometimes.
That's right.
Okay. Hey, Debbie, it's so fun as always to chat with you about privacy, trust, and all things cybersecurity and XYZ. We think this is such a vital topic, everyone. It's going to be a huge topic 2024 beyond. And I highly encourage you to follow Debbie Reynolds. She's doing really amazing things here. She has a long legacy in privacy. I actually feel blessed to have met you, ironically, on LinkedIn, and simply because of the great content that you put out there and continue to put out there. So, Debbie, you want to tell everyone how to get in touch with you and be part of the flow of your insights and your good word.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so sweet. Thank you. Well, people can always connect with me on LinkedIn. Just type in Data Diva Debbie Reynolds, so my name pops right up. Or you can go to my website, DebbieReynoldsConsulting.com. I have a lot of interviews, videos, podcasts, a lot of newsletters, papers that people can read. So it's a cornucopia, kaleidoscope of privacy information that people can, about emerging technology and privacy that they can read.
Awesome. Yeah. And so, everyone, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate your viewership. And, please subscribe to Next Curve, our YouTube channel specifically. The easiest thing to do is to subscribe to our research portal at www.next-curve.com. And there you can get a constant diet of the tech and industry insights that matter. And thank you again, Debbie. Always a pleasure. To everyone out there watching, have a wonderful holiday season, and we will see you in 2024.